guys, and welcome back to another Off the Cuff. I found this on Shaun over at Zoobox. Go and check it out. I'll leave a link in the description. And I felt like we need to cover it, especially those of us that are in the UK. This morning is kind of a British, obviously, morning breakfast show, I guess you'd call it. They tend to be similar to sort of MSNBC. Anyway, enough chit-chat. Let's have a watch.
Story last week and into the weekend, the horrific events which took place in Keyham in Plymouth on Thursday have been confirmed as Britain's deadliest mass shooting in over 10 years. The gunman, called Jake Davidson, claimed the lives of 5 victims, including his own mother and a 3-year-old girl, before turning the gun on himself.
Yeah, and 2 other victims remain in hospital. Davison has since been linked to a community known as INCELS. This is a group of men who identify as involuntary celibates, and they blame...
So basically we're already going off on a complete tangent. I don't get the whole incel thing. Like, if you are involuntarily celibate, just have a look at yourself. And you know, it is tough these days. Look, man, I know some really good dudes that find it difficult to find a woman. So I know it's difficult, but you just have to push on and do the best you can do about improving yourself, or just waiting to find somebody that likes you for who you are. What I don't understand is how they were like, so this nutter who happened to be an incel for a few months killed his family and a few people that tried to stop him on the way out. So, INCELS, the terror group. Like, okay, what else?
Women for their failure to find a partner. The group has been connected to a number of violent acts around the world, and you might not have even heard of INCEL. So we're joined now by journalist Laura Bates, who infiltrated this community, and also criminologist Professor David Wilson. Good morning to you both.
Very quickly, I just thought I would say, for those of you that don't know what an incel is, they're basically, well, in theory, an incel is somebody that is involuntarily celibate. The internet kind of crowd that sprang up out of it was essentially a group of dudes that got together. They make some dank memes and some dark humor jokes, and essentially just sit around moaning about stuff. So yeah, don't try and let them make out that it's anything worse than that, because you know, in 99.9% of the cases, 0.9999, that's exactly what it is.
Laura, I do think there were a lot of people who said, what's INCEL? Who are these people? What is this organisation? And you were researching a book, firstly, when you came across these people.
Yes, and really the thing that's shocking is that there is able to be this big hate group that is dedicated to extremist hatred of a group, women in this case, that has spilled into offline violence around the world again and again. There have been...
They don't hate... Listen, they're not a massive terrorist hate group. If anything, they probably hate themselves, and they kind of... Their way of outletting that is to pick examples of women that you might see on TikTok and stuff like that, and say, look, see how hard it is to get a girlfriend? So, disagree.
Multiple massacres explicitly in its name, and yet most people have never even heard of it. No. The reason for that is that when these massacres happen, we don't describe them as terrorism, and we don't talk about these individuals as having been radicalised, because the group they're attacking are women. We don't tend to see that as out of the ordinary.
In fact, very quickly...
Why, Laura, do they hate women?
So these are men, particularly incels, who describe themselves as involuntary celibates. In other words, they're men who aren't having sex and would like to be. They've created an entire worldview that sees women as utterly dehumanised sex objects, purely there for their pleasure. And so they blame women for the fact that they're not getting what they see as deserved sex.
Why is that the fault of a woman and not their fault? You know, why can't they look in the mirror
deep question,
Eamonn,
Eamonn.
And see the
That's
way
why they pay you the big
look,
bucks.
maybe the way mentally they are? Why is it a woman's fault?
Well, exactly. I mean, as if any other extremist ideology, it doesn't make any sense. It is entirely hate-fueled. But it comes down to the dehumanisation of women. So the idea that they think women are only there to have sex with them, and therefore are denying them sex if they don't do it. And I think the answer is violence.
How did you infiltrate this group? So you say it is all men, so you had to pretend to be a man, I'm assuming. How difficult was it for you to be involved on those forums?
Well, you had to learn the language and the kind of pseudo-scientific backstory story that these groups have kind of created to back up their twisted worldview. There are some of these groups where you have to answer a kind of interview questions to get in, to gain access. And there are a lot of things that you need to learn. You know, for example, if you use the word women on these forums, that would be an instant red flag. They don't talk about women, they use the word foid, which is their way of saying female humanoid, which shows you how little they think of women as human beings.
It's just dark humour.
But Professor, Laura is talking there about their innate hatred of women, blaming women in all things.
It's a bunch of young,
Why then in
depressed dudes
Davison's
using
case
dark humour.
does he shoot a child? Does he shoot men as well as women?
Firstly, can I say Laura's work is wonderful, and she really opened up some territory that I think has been important to consider much more seriously than that has been hitherto. You can bizarrely get female incels that are called femcells. And of course, the people who self-identify as incels not only have an extreme misogyny based against their hatred of women, but they also want to attack some men who are seen as being more desirable than they are. They call them chads in the kind of language that Laura was starting to talk about. So their targets can also be men. I think the key thing that we've got to start working out, and you asked the question, Eamonn, that there's a sense of entitlement that they feel. It's not just that they see themselves as poor me because of some kind of genetic determinism. They're too short, they're too tall, they're too overweight, they're not seen as being physically attractive. They don't just think of themselves as poor me's. They see themselves, ironically, as entitled.
Okay, I'm not having... Listen. So this guy is our in the UK, kind of our resident budget TV psychologist or psychiatrist. I can never remember the difference. Listen, everybody knows that what the term Chad means. Everyone that's into internet culture knows what the term Chad means. You know, it just means like an alpha male, really good looking, or really good at sports, or really witty. They don't despise Chads as a general. There's obviously some jealousy and whatnot. But this stuff just seems like if a boomer was trying to teach somebody how to play this amazing game that they just learnt their grandchild played. This game is called Pokemon, and the way you play this, like, these people just seem completely uninformed. Like, a lot of this stuff is just dark humor. There are twisted old guys that have been wounded in life that take advantage of the younger guys coming in. So you've got young lads that are 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. In fact, I'll just say 15 to 23. And maybe they see on their favourite TV show these good-looking young dudes that are getting girlfriends and they're going to parties and they're having sex and blah, blah, blah. And they feel like, well, maybe that's what I should do. And that's understandable. Like, everybody goes through that. Unfortunately, they get caught up in this... this kind of corner in the internet which is full of dark humour and the occasional psycho. This is not some sort of organised terrorist group. To call it terrorism, like, I'm 50-50 on it. Like, my first thought was that's absurd because, you know, generally I think terrorism is about a political motive. So it's terrorising people to push a political agenda. The sort of handful of people that have ever done this, that have belonged to the name of that have belonged to the group of incels, is just their way. They're so depressed that this is their way of lashing out on the way out. They're not doing it because they think that if they do that, the world will force all women to have sex with average men or bad-looking men or whatever. So a lot of this just seems really dishonest. But yeah.
To, in the words of the patron saint of incels, Elliot Rodger, get laid. And the fact that they're not getting laid, they put at the doors of women, and men who are getting laid are also therefore their targets.
And who is Elliot Rodger? Because Rodger, I'm going to do a Rodger, is mentioned often on these forums.
Yes, Elliot Rodger.
Sorry, I know this is going to annoy people that I keep doing this. I just want to say something about these people, particularly everyone except her. She's obviously a feminist, she's found her target, and she's happy doing that. And then she can bring it to the mainstream. The other three, who are all in their 60s, I don't know whether David Wilson, yeah, he'd be in his 60s. You know, they're talking about how it's sick and it's awful, and why don't they stop and think about why they're in that situation? Those three in their 60s come from a completely different world, a world where people, you know, still went to youth clubs, pubs, bars, social clubs. That's nowhere near as common anymore, especially in the last year and a half, you know, under COVID. But even before that, I know a lot of good-looking dudes with good personalities that have good jobs and a good income, and they even find it difficult. So it's not just a case of, it's not how they're kind of portraying it. It is very difficult in the modern age to find a decent other half. It just is. So I kind of feel like it's a little bit insulting, even just to the viewer, for them to be having an opinion on it when, you know, they've been married for however many decades, because I believe the two presenting the program are married, and have been for a long, long time. And I just think you wouldn't know what it's like. So how, you know, aside from the fact you're not even trying to find out why this is going on, you probably couldn't understand that. Like, you probably don't understand online dating, and, you know, working full time, but still not managing to find any ways of socially interacting with the opposite sex.
Was a young man who in 2014 in Santa Barbara, California, massacred 6 people and injured another 14, explicitly in an incel massacre. He talked about murdering sluts, he talked about taking revenge on women for the fact that he hadn't had sex, that he was a virgin.
Well, listening to the professor, Laura, you infiltrating their ranks, then they're finding out you are a woman. You are a woman that pretended to be one of them. What sort? I mean, that must invoke fury from them.
Yes, so they've been looking for me since. There are men in these groups now posting pictures of themselves with weapons saying, which one of you is Laura Bates? I'm coming to get you, I'm coming to find you. They've been trying to hack my email account.
So sadly, that's just internet life if you go up against
well, I want to hear from both of you now. You first of all, Laura, then the professor. Who are these incels? I mean, we know what they have in common, but who are they? What backgrounds are they from? Who typically would they be?
Typically, I'd say we're talking about educated white men of a range of ages. It's so normal to dismiss these guys and say we're talking about a handful of...
They're going to be white because it's the UK. And still in the UK, we are, at last count, 87% white. And that's white British. So there's also, you obviously have white European, white Irish, etc. So obviously the majority of them are going to be white. Just thought I'd put that in there because nowadays everybody seems to love crapping on the white working class.
Losers in their mum's basements. That's not the case. It's a big community, significant, numbering in the hundreds of thousands.
And how many incels are there in Britain?
Well, Laura used the figure 100,000. That's probably more akin to what's going on in North America, particularly Canada and the United States. In this country, we're probably looking at tens of thousands. Although the websites and the various platforms that host these kinds of extreme misogyny, there may be many more people using or clicking onto those websites than the core group that will use them regularly. But if we think about 10,000, that would be a good starting point.
And 10,000 what? 10,000 oddballs, 10,000 terrorists? How would you classify them?
I absolutely would classify them as terrorism. I mean, what is terrorism in terms of our legislation? It's the intentional use of violence to intimidate the public. And that's what they want to do. The get out of jail free clause, as it were, in terms of our legislation, is that this is intentional use of violence to intimidate that doesn't have a religious or a race or a political, either far right or far left ideology behind it. But the Devon and Cornwall police's rush to say this wasn't terrorism seems to me to have been very short-sighted indeed, because at the end of the day, Eamonn, Ruth, we are dealing with people who, because of their extreme misogyny, are targeting a specific group of people.
He wasn't targeting women. He was targeting his family. he happened to have been on incel communities. See, this is what frustrates the crap out of me. Like, people take an event that's happened and then they find like a variety of information around the person, and then they choose the one that they want to link it to. Like, he was also a gym goer, and they could have linked it to steroid use or something like that. They have just picked the one that they want to link it to, and now we're going down a path, and people are sort of halfway into the conversation just going, yeah, wow, that's terrible. But, like, this has nothing to do with what happened. At least they don't know it does. As far as they know, he attacked his family members and some people on the way out. And again, I shouldn't have to say this. Obviously, disavow, condone it. It was terrible. The guy is a nutter. But it just seems bizarre that we're going down this particular route.
Women. This is an extreme form of hatred against women, and we have to start naming it for what it is. And frankly, it is terrorism.
The Devon and Cornwall police, actually, David, say the decision that this incident was not a terrorist incident was made by the National Counter-Terrorism Network following a referral from Devon and Cornwall police. So they're saying that came from above them. Laura, what about grooming? I mean, are they grooming younger men with this ideology and hatred for women?
Absolutely. These are groups very deliberately wanting to recruit more people to their cause. They're targeting boys as young as 11. They don't go straight in at that stage with incel forums and ideology. They find them on bodybuilding websites. They find them on gaming live streams and gaming strategy chat rooms. And they use things like funny anti-feminist memes, jokes, viral YouTube videos. They use this kind of veil of banter and jokes, but they describe that as, in their own words, adding cherry flavour to children's medicine. And in my work in schools with young people, you do hear an increasing number of young people coming out with some of these complete myths and very misogynistic misconceptions.
You can spot
Tell me
that.
something.
You can see it, yes.
So, David, this is radicalisation then, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And
So really quickly, just notice how we've gone from a dude losing his mind and killing his family to radicalization of young boys. Just bear that in mind.
And you know, in the United States, or particularly in Canada, the Canadians already recognize this as a form of terrorism. And what we need to do is start having proper discussions with our young people in the way that Laura was explaining in terms of the work that she does in schools. We need to start talking to young men about what it means to be male. We need to start having a proper discussion about masculinity. And break this idea that's part of the incel, or those people who self-identify as incels, this link between their belief in their entitlement and therefore their power as they see it over women. That's the discussion that needs to be taking place in every home where there are young men who might be interested in this kind of extreme misogyny.
Laura, what happened in Plymouth shocked and sickened all of us, but for you, had you got an insight into this? Had you a feeling something like this was going to happen, could have happened?
Well, sadly, yes. You know, it isn't the first time. It was only 6 days after a man in Tokyo stabbed 10 people on a train because he saw women looking happy and wanted to kill them. It's not the first time in the UK even that a young man has attempted to murder. Ben Moynihan stabbed 3 different women because he said he hated women and wanted to punish them because he was a virgin. The only reason this is shocking to other people is because we haven't joined those dots, because we haven't described these cases as terror.
The only reason that they're even, again, we shouldn't really even be in this in this ballpark. We're there because they've taken us there by choice. I feel like we've always had complete nutters, in all parts of society. We've always had people that do ludicrous and harmful things for the most ludicrous reasons. You know, I remember, 5 years ago, where a little girl stabbed another little girl because she believed that the Slender Man would allow her into the dream world if she killed another little girl. But we're not having conversations about talking to our little girls about anti-Slender Man murdering.
terrorism. And what I'm seeing now on the INCEL forums that I had previously been on is men celebrating this act, describing him as a hero, hoping that the victims suffered, and crucially, talking about carrying out more acts, more massacres. And you think, if this had been another form of extremism, if this had been an ISIS massacre, for example, would those websites still be up and easily accessible today?
What about parents? You mentioned there, you know, that they're finding these young boys on gaming sites, and can parents look out for maybe language that they use, their young sons might be using,
Telltale
or
signs.
behaviour that they might have?
Yes, they can. So there are lots of bits of language that might be red flags, referring to people as normies or as triggered. Normies is the word
What?
INCELs use for people outside.
No, okay, so be careful, guys, because you might be a terrorist if you use the word normie or triggered. Yeah, that sounds completely freaking reasonable.
Their community, triggered, based, cucked, describing
what?
being red-pilled or black-pilled, which are words they...
So, red-pilled, black-pilled, based, cucked, normie, and triggered, which in my opinion are probably weakly internet language, and will probably be much more commonly used by young kids who have been brought up in the era, like solely in the era of the internet. Those words apparently could make you a terrorist. You could be being groomed. We may as well add words like cat and the and, I don't know, door.
They used to describe being infiltrated into the ideology. And it's worth saying as well that they see this as a kind of conduit to other forms of extremism. It isn't completely separate from far-right, white nationalist, white supremacist movements. They actually really see it as a slipway. So parents...
And there we go. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you go from one complete nutter killing his family, and you gently guide it towards one of the freakier, less socially accepted areas of that guy's life. And then we end up at where we always wanted to end up, at white nationalism. Or I should say they end up where they always wanted to end up, at their white nationalism.
Parents might see a combination of perhaps also racism creeping in as well. The INCEL community is a very racist community. This is a racist ideology. And of course, white supremacist is a deeply misogynistic ideology.
Yeah.
Oh, is it?
Just finally, Laura, how frightened are you for your own safety?
Well, I think that I'd be more frightened if I was in the US. A member of one of these extremist communities in the US was recently upset with a judge who he claimed was a feminist expletive and turned up at a house described as a delivery driver and opened fire.
Okay, so Shaun was talking about this. This was somebody linked to the to an Epstein court case, and the judge was killed by someone dressed as a FedEx driver. This is completely absurd. I was going to say I can't believe this, but I can believe this now, because people like her are going on to shows where the producers probably are very sympathetic towards her and her politics and her ideologies. But certainly the sort of the presenters that are, you know, generally in this country 50 plus, they don't have a clue. They don't know what triggered or based or red-pilled means, and you know they probably have no idea about Epstein and you know the FedEx assassin. So she's just happy to just hand it all out, knowing that no one's going to call her up on it. Well, someone is going to.
Fire. I think there is danger, and I think that we have to take this seriously. But even saying that, I know there'll be resistance, people saying, oh, stop making a fuss, you're overreacting. Part of the reason for that is because we don't call these attacks terrorism, and we don't describe these groups as extremists. And if we did, we'd be able to deal with them more effectively.
But people like you don't even want to call actual terrorism terrorism. So if you don't want to call people that actually have a political ideology that they're willing to be violent for, diva, terrorism. But I've heard this before as well, not just with, you know, the inceldom and all that, on those guys, but they want to call anything they dislike that's violence, even if it's not actual violence, because remember, words are violence, but Antifa violence isn't violence. They want to call that terrorism.
Well, Laura Bates, stay safe. Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, I ended just
for
in
your work.
time. Well, I completely
Also
lost my
disgusting,
mind.
so shocking. Professor David Wilson, appreciate your take on things. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, cheers, Dave. Okay, so there you go, guys. Another quick one there. Or maybe it wasn't so quick. Hopefully you found that kind of interesting. I just find it a bit frustrating when people are... They're clearly ideologues, I guess. They're being invited on mainstream TV and going out to, you know, I don't know what they get, 500,000 people. You know, they're telling you if your children use the word based, triggered, or normie, or red pill, that they could be potential terrorists. And the fact that they're linking this at all is completely absurd, because this dude killed his mother, like after an argument. He didn't kill her because he couldn't have sex with her. He killed her over an argument because he was roided up and he was depressed. You have to kind of be like, look, obviously I'm not defending the guy, but you're lying, and that is a fact. Anyway, so thanks for Shaun for putting me onto this. And oh yeah, if you wouldn't mind leaving a like if you did enjoy it, that would really help me out. And thanks, guys. I will see you again soon.
Winston stopped writing, partly because he was suffering from cramp. He did not know what had made him pour out this stream of rubbish